And do we know who's going to call a roll tonight?
So Irene is just texting.
Irene.
She is here, but her video's not coming on. Irene, can you speak though?
Might be on mute.
No, I don't even see a little box with her name in it, so we'll give it a minute.
I do not see one yet either, and you are good to go on YouTube as well, Ed.
All right, so we'll give it a minute before we start for Irene to join us.
She's saying that she's here, but she's having technical difficulties, but she can hear what we're saying. But Tom, could you maybe send her another link?
I can call the roll.
All right, very good. Then we'll go ahead and get started. Welcome to the May 1st regular meeting of the Board and Estimate and Taxation. Let's start with a roll call, and Mr. Merrill, if you'll call the roll, that would be great.
Mayor Rilling, here. Ann Yang,
Here.
Ed Abrams,
Here.
James Frayer,
Here.
Troy Jelleret,
Here.
Mr. Constant, and Mr. Kasimis. 5 present, we have a quorum.
Great, thank you. Okay, there are a number of items on our agenda tonight, including the approval of minutes, some transfers, some other business related to the capital budget, and approval of the operating budget before we get to additional items. Can we start by moving to the approval of the minutes? Can I get a motion to review, amend, and then approve the minutes from last meeting, please?
So move.
Troy.
Thank you, Jim. All right. I noticed, and Ann, thank you very much. You submitted some changes to the minutes in writing that we will ensure get included. Are there any other changes, amendments, additions to the minutes from our last meeting? Seeing none, all in favor of approving the minutes as amended with Ann's comments, signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? The minutes are approved.
I'll abstain, Mr. Abrams. I was not at the meeting.
I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor. All right. There are no special appropriations for tonight, so we'll move to the transfer agenda, starting on page 11 of our package. And that starts tonight. Before I do that, can I get a motion to move the transfer items to discussion and then a vote?
So
moved.
Thank you, Jim. All right, there are a number of different transfer items. Tom, do you want to lead us through those and introduce the appropriate speaker for each?
Sure. So starting with the police department, they're looking for a transfer of a little over $80,000 for their cars and vans. On the summary sheet on page 11, I just listed the various police accounts because on the following page 12, you will see them all listed and all transferring to the cars and vans account. We have Chief Walsh and Mickey Dosmo on the line to speak to this one.
Good evening. Yes, we're requesting the transfer of $80,858 from various operating accounts into our cars and vans to pay for the new cost of the inflationary pricing of all the upfits of the vehicles. Our last round of car purchases, in totality, the car cost about $53,000 to $54,000. With the purchase of the car and the upfits alone went up to $21,600. So per unit right now, we're looking at $66,000 per car. So that is a drastic increase from our last car purchase of almost $12,000 per unit. We did negotiate with the fleet person who does our upfitting, and we did look at other pricing, and we were able to drop that price $3,000 per vehicle, but still providing the best safety equipment that we have been providing for the marked patrol vehicles. And just due to inflation, everything's going up.
And Chief, just a question, because last month we approved $50,000 in additional costs. This 80 is in addition to the 50, so in total, there's $130,000 worth of additional cost associated with the new vehicles?
Yeah, last month was strictly for the laptops and all the ports and electronics. We do that internally through our IT. All the costs is driven up through all the laptops. Each police car has a MDT in it with a modem, and then there's a whole structure which holds it in place and all the wiring, and all those prices have gone up tremendously. That was a separate quote from our IT representative gave us Ari. From
Thank
last
you.
month.
Do
Additional
you
questions?
shop that around a little bit? I mean, do you go to just one person? Is there one source that does this for us, or can we put that out for RFP? What's the process that we go through?
We have put it out for RFP. There's one in New Jersey and there's two in Connecticut. And Fleet in West Haven always wins the RFP. We have traditionally used them, and he is cooperative with us, and he has lowered the price in some of the models and things like that. He was able to actually buy in bulk with a larger police department's order. So he was able to put some of our stuff that we need in a much larger order, and he was able to get better pricing from the vendor. So I've been on the phone with him quite a bit in the past month to try to get these prices down. But between the price of the new cars and the price of all the equipment, we haven't changed anything. It's just the standard equipment, the lights, the sirens, the cages, all the safety equipment, the racks for the equipment, the racks for the rifle. It's all been driven up. Last time we paid 14 to 15,000. Right now we're averaging 22,000 per car, just to get them on the road once we take delivery of them.
Yeah. That's insanity.
Additional
But
comments?
that's why with next year's capital purchase, it's still going to be a variable. How many cars? I know you had asked me that last meeting, how many cars we're going to be able to afford. We're going to get the money and just see how much we can afford.
Additional comments? All right, Tom, we want to move to the next transfers. We'll approve all the transfers at the end.
Okay, next one is fire department. They actually have two series of transfers. The first one is focused on salaries and wages. The second one is more of the gas and heating fuel items that we talked about with other departments over the last few months, as well as the 24 operating budget. But I see Chief Gatto here to talk to these.
Yes, good evening. Good evening, Mr. Mayor. So the first transfer is a total of 70,000 to go into three different accounts, all taken from the firefighter wages and salary account. One goes into the salary for the administration, where we moved over a fire lieutenant from the firefighting division to the administration division. That was not budgeted. That happened in January. The other one is a $9,000 transfer for the part-time mechanic. We hired a part-time mechanic a few months ago, and that also was not budgeted. And then the final for the salary goes into the Deputy Emergency Management Director, who received a $6,000 raise this year. So that $6,000 will cover that. The second is $10,000 to cover gas, which is actually natural gas, to heat some of the stations. And the next one is $10,000 to cover for heating fuel, mainly for the apparatus maintenance garage, 100 Fairfield Avenue. So those are the two transfers, all coming from the same account.
Thank you, Chief. Questions for the chief on any of these transfers?
That increase of $6,000, is that a contract?
I believe so. I don't know. She's an ordinance employee. Maybe the mayor could answer that. Because I know they got bonuses and raises, or Alicia maybe.
Ordinance employees, the way it works. Oh, sorry, Mayor, do you want to answer?
No, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
The ordinance employees get the same 2.35% raise that union members get, and then they also are on a step system.
Okay.
So it's potentially that she moved up a step and also got the regular wage increase.
Okay.
Any other questions for the chief? All right, let's move to legislative, Tom.
Okay, this one is our first one of the evening coming from the contingency account. This is another $63,000 for the legislative, which is where we pay the outside counsel for the charter rewrite. So as we had moved 75,000 from the 22 rollovers into this year to try to cover that, but we have just about exhausted that. We did, Mr. Burnett went back to Attorney Mednick and got an estimate of what he felt he needed for the rest of this fiscal year, as well as into 2024. He anticipates being done sometime in 24, but this is just for fiscal 23. We'll likely be back sometime or at one of the next BET meetings, either July or August, looking to cover the rest of his efforts for the next few months. Alicia, do you want to add anything to that? I know Greg was trying to get to this meeting, but he had a conflict until about 7 o'clock.
I'm happy to answer any questions if anyone has questions.
I have a question, which is the total amounts. What are the amounts from last year, this year, and future, and then the total amount expected to be spent on council?
So we'll be at 135 for this year, and then we're going to need another. He estimates 3 months at 15,000 a month for fiscal 24, so it'll be another 45,000 then.
And was there expense last year as well?
No,
Okay, so it's 180 in total.
180 or 235? Because you talked about expense this year plus the 62 plus another 40, roughly.
yeah, so 62 plus the 75 is 130-ish, and then another 45, that's 180-ish.
Okay.
So, in a normal year, and this line is about $10,000, but obviously we don't
Right.
frequently do charter rewrites.
Right.
Before we go any further, let's just have the record show that Kendrick joined the meeting at about 6:41 p.m. So any additional comments on the transfer for the legislative branch?
No.
Okay, do we want to move to HR?
Yeah, this is the last transfer of the night, another one from contingency. So Tina had a retirement of a long-serving employee in her area and has to pay out the severance package for departments like the police and fire, where they are consistently understaffed, at least these last couple of years. It's not such an issue because we can transfer money, but in the smaller departments like Tina's, it becomes a bit of a challenge. So we're looking for 50,000 in contingency to finalize that severance payout. And Tina is on the line with us tonight.
Any questions for Tina? Okay, seeing no questions. Any questions anyone else has about any of the proposed transfers just before we move it to vote?
I did have one comment. Tom, maybe it's just the way you prepare these forms, but it seemed like that contingency available number didn't change with the 50 and the 60 some odd thousand that we're taking out.
So it changed last month when we went to contingency. But
Right.
what I do is I run the reports and it tells me how much is remaining. And I guess if we did it sequentially, if we voted on each one, I could say, okay,
Right.
now we're down 70,000, now we're down 50,000. I tend to do
Okay.
that just once a month.
All right, no problem.
What is the balance now in contingency, Tom?
We're right about an even $1 million. So we started the year at 1,330,000. And next year, the 24 budget, we have put in for 1.5 million.
Thank you.
So seeing no other comments or questions, all in favor of approving the transfers as presented, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? The transfers are approved. All right. Next, we're moving to other business, and there's a resolution on the table on slide 18 or page 18 of our package that we need to consider. Can I get the item moved for discussion, please?
So moved.
Thank you, Jim. Madam Clerk, may I get you to read the resolution, please? I guess we're still having problems with Madam Clerk's audio.
I noticed she's listed as an attendee. Should she be upgraded to a panelist in order to speak, or?
Yeah, I've got her as guest here. Let's see, change role to, no, she is as a panelist. Is this,
When I checked on who was present, it said she was an attendee.
Well, she's disappeared now.
Yeah, she's still listed as an attendee.
It looks like she's on both lists, but on the panelist list, she has no microphone.
you know what, I'm gonna put her as a co-host, see if that works. And now you're up there. Want to try it now, Irene?
No.
Do we have to read that whole resolution? I mean, that. it's
Just
kinda
the
lengthy, isn't it?
first part, please. So I can go ahead and read it into the record if you would. Just give me a minute to get to the correct page.
Oh, hold on, I got one more button here. All right, try it now, Irene.
No.
Promote the panel. I see it's still muted on here. I think she has to do that. Can you unmute, Irene? Just nod yes or no.
Would you like me to read it in, Ed?
I'll do, we'll just give Irene one more second and then I'll be happy to read it.
Okay.
Yeah, she's a panelist now.
Hear me now,
Yes, we can.
Yes.
but now you can't see me. That's okay.
No, we
can
got
see
you.
you.
We
You
can.
know what? I have the phone. I'm gonna sign off from my phone. Maybe that's.
No, leave it, please.
Leave
Irene.
it. Okay, all
Yeah,
right.
just don't
that's
mess
fine.
around.
So I have two. Anyway, I apologize. Resolution making appropriations for various public improvements aggregating 48,440,692 for the fiscal year 2023-2024 capital budget, and authorizing the issuance of 48,440,692 general obligation bonds of the city to meet certain appropriations in the fiscal year 2023-2024 capital budget. That's letter A. And letter B, approval of the fiscal year 2023-2024 operating budget and tax rates.
So first,
I
let's,
think-
any
yeah.
discussion on letter A? That's the
Yeah, I'd like
one
to-
we're gonna start
I'd like
with.
to move that and make a comment.
We did move it. Mr. Freyer moved it. So
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, the comment, the floor is yours.
Yeah, the comment, we really went over the capital requests, again, with a fine tooth comb, trying to look at what was absolutely needed and what would be consistent with our POCD. Planning Commission looked and reviewed it, said all the requests that we put forth are consistent with our plan of conservation and development. And, you know, there are certain things that we wanted to do for safety issues in the school system, for security, for a new driveway, if you will, for Tracy School, air conditioning for the schools, technical technology improvements for the schools. And we increased our paving amount. And we're looking at our coastal resilience. We're trying to do everything we can to keep the spending within reason, but also to make sure that we move the city forward in a proper direction. So I want to thank all the department heads for their cooperation, how they worked with us and looked, and we had nice discussions as to what was absolutely needed and what could wait for perhaps another year or two. So we did put some things back after I looked at the budget. I thought there were some things in there that I felt were absolutely needed. So I did put them back. And we got some good news from Mr. Dakowitz that we're well within our spending bonding limit so we won't lose our AAA bond rating. So again, thank you to all the people that work so hard to make it happen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Any additional comments, Henry?
Yes, two comments. One is, in reviewing this, it states that the approvals for the authorization to be approved as to the legality by Shipman and Goodwin as bond counsel. As you're probably aware, today we seek the appropriations, which is the legal approval to spend this money. At the same time, we look for authorization to issue GO bonds. However, as I've indicated, we now split those two. They don't happen at the same time. We issue GO bonds based on our cash flow projections because of IRS requirements. So Shipman and Goodwin are our current bond counsel. If we borrowed all of these monies today, I would leave the wording as is. But my preference is to change the wording to say, and be approved as to their legality by bond counsel, currently Shipman and Goodwin, so that if this doesn't occur for 3-4 years and we have different bond counsel at that time, I still want the approval done properly. So that would be a change I recommend.
So I'm sorry, Henry, I understand it, but can you repeat the specific change to the resolution just so we make sure we have it clear in the record?
It's in the details. I'll give you an example on page 19, section 5. When they talk about the mayor and CFO are authorized to make borrowing. Okay, about 7 lines down, it says, certified by a bank or trust company designated by the CFO and be approved as to their legality. Goodwin LLP as counsel. So wherever, I don't know if Irene, you've got two things going.
No, it's Troy's line that is lighting up when we do that.
But my point is that wherever it says approved by legality, as to their legality, it should be the generic then current bond counsel. Shipman and Goodwin is our current bond counsel, but if we go out to bond at a time when Shipman and Goodwin are not our bond counsel, I want the resolution to be authorized to whoever our bond counsel is. That's all I'm trying to do.
I understand what you're trying to do. What I don't know then is, do we need to table the resolution until the changes are made before voting on it? Or can we vote on the resolution acknowledging changes will be made after that vote?
Yeah, I think we can vote on the resolution and just say the resolution as amended.
Okay.
And we should probably vote on the amendment first.
So, okay, that's a fair point. Any issues, discussion, questions for Henry on his proposed amendment?
No, it makes sense.
Agreed.
We have to
All in-
move the amendment, Ed, first or not?
Just for the safety of it, let's go ahead and move the amendment, even though we moved the entire resolution. So can I get a motion on the amendment, please? So move, Troy. Thank you. All in favor of approving the amendment signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? The amendment passes.
Okay.
Then I'm sorry, Henry, I spoke
No.
over you.
I wanted to comment on the mayor's comment about our bond capacity for issuance. We could do it after the vote. We could do it now, whatever you prefer.
Let's make the comment before the vote so that we have it in the record before we've approved.
Okay. currently, our bonds outstanding is about 360 million. About a year and a half ago, the financial advisor and I did some calculations and analysis and determined that for the economic support, for the grant list, for the way our city operates, if we issued more than 400 million bonds outstanding, we are getting into a danger zone regarding our AAA bond rating. There are other metrics that are also measured, such as the amount of debt service compared to our operating expenses. But as we rolled into this year's capital budget, I was concerned that we may have a request based on cash flow of issuing more than 40 million of bonds. And I discussed with the mayor the real possibility of sitting down with everybody who's in charge of these projects and saying, we know that you got everything approved, but we can't afford to have all your cash flow requests go forward because we don't have enough bond money if we only borrow 40 million. So in that regard, I contacted our financial advisor and asked him to issue a formal memo on how much debt we could take on without jeopardizing the AAA. He said, great timing. Moody's just changed their analytical framework, and quite a number of towns and cities in the state of Connecticut have been put on credit watch. So he said, we weren't put on credit watch, but there is a change in methodology. And he came back 2 weeks later and he said, good news. Based on the new methodology, we are going to be viewed even more favorably than we were in the past. And we have a limit, he estimates, at 500 million. The key driver there, as we've always stated, our pension and OPEB trust funds are very well funded. Our 4 different pension funds are funded at about 75% of accrued liability, and our OPEB is over 95% accrued. Understand, more than 50% of the towns in Connecticut do not even have an OPEB trust. The state is about 50% funded on its pensions. So we were doing very well, but it wasn't in the formal calculations. Now it is, and allows us even more room. So we all breathe a sigh of relief because we hate to say no to anybody who has an authorized capital project. I'm still working on the cash flow estimates. I think we're going to end up with 60 or 65 million for the bonds for this summer. Not as high as last year's 82 face value, 90 total proceeds. But again, since it is larger than this year's capital budget, we are starting to borrow for all those prior capital projects that were authorized but never borrowed and bonded before. So it's very good news. As the mayor said, we had extensive discussions with all the departments to keep it lean and mean. And that's the good news.
Thank you very much, Henry.
Good.
Additional questions, comments regarding the resolution as amended?
I have a question relative to the accounting and sort of the assets. So it was in the news that the city is selling one of its pieces of property for north of $4 million. How does that affect the capital budget and how you think of bonding?
What piece of property is that?
It's the one by the YMCA.
No, it's the one by the
The other
train,
one?
the train
By the
station.
train station.
By what?
By
Oh,
the
the train station. Yes,
Yeah,
to Spinnaker.
So when the city sells an asset and the funds come in, how does that work relative to your, presumably you don't need more, you don't have to issue the bonds.
Well, first of all, it depends on whether the asset was financed with tax-free bonds. So for example, let's say we had a parking garage that was financed with tax-free bonds. There are very strict rules regarding that, and we have to coordinate with our tax and bond counsel. If it isn't, and we own it outright, then the proceeds are recorded as revenues in a special revenue fund, and those are available to be spent probably in the general fund. I don't see why it would be restricted. But we're allowed to spend general fund dollars on anything. So just like when we got ARPA grants from the federal government, okay, an argument could be made that we could have used some of those proceeds to pay for certain capital projects that were not yet bonded and minimize and reduce the amount of total debt. We didn't because we had other projects that were worthy and determined that those were with a higher priority. But that's basically how I view sale of assets.
Thank you. I just didn't know what the convention would be.
And I would say I would check with my auditors on anything regarding that, of course.
Could I
Liz,
add
do
one
you have a
more?
comment?
Yeah, I'd just like to say that if we have a good feeling about knowing when a closing is going to take place on the sale of a city asset, the departments who are working on it will let Henry and Tom know during the budget process that we can expect that as expected revenue. If we don't have confidence that a closing will take place within a particular fiscal year, we don't want to take the chance of counting it as expected revenue if we don't know if we're going to get it. So in that case, it will come in as unexpected revenue during the fiscal year and will potentially allow us to draw down less of the rainy day fund than we were originally anticipating.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Could we at some point of time, this is off the resolution, have a discussion of perhaps some of these assets that sit on the city's balance sheet, similar to contingent liabilities, have a balance sheet discussion as to what might bring in liquidity, but then what also we might have as potential liabilities, let's say in the form of litigation.
Yeah, let's look at that for a future agenda. I'd like to stay on the resolution if we can,
Yep.
just so we can move through that. Any other comments, questions specific to the resolution as amended? Right. All in favor of approving the resolution as amended, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? The resolution passes. And your comments noted. We'll work with Tom to figure out how and when that is appropriate for an agenda. Next on other business is approval of the FY 23-24 operating budget. That's on page, begins on page 27 of our packet. Tom, I believe this has not changed whatsoever from anything we've looked at now for the, I think, fourth time specifically. So any comments
Yeah.
before we?
I'll move the
Yeah,
item.
I-
There has been a change.
Yeah, I was gonna say, there is a change.
As Leisha mentioned a few moments ago, sometimes we get unexpected revenue. And that's being worked on right now. So we were able to add that to the operating budget expenses and reduce some of the mill rates even further because they were rather high and we were not comfortable. As I mentioned earlier, this has been a very, very difficult budget season, perhaps the most I've been involved in because of inflation, because of the pandemic with people losing their jobs and some people losing their homes. And, it gets to a point where with 8.5% inflation, it becomes very difficult to justify raising taxes to an extreme degree when people are struggling. Now, having said that, as I said, we were able to, and I'll let Tom or Henry explain the difference. And having said that, I've also been meeting with Dr. Estrella on some creative ways, if you will, to allow the school budget to be increased without affecting the mill rate or the MBR. And hopefully we'll have some favorable results on that as well. So just wanted to put that out there, and maybe Henry or Tom can talk about the operating budget from where it stands now.
Yes, thanks, Mayor. I'll talk about the operating budget. I think it was just a desire to go from version 24 to version 25, from Willie Mays to Joe Pepitone. So we're very, very pleased about that. We've had discussions with the Norwalk Housing Authority. Because a number of years back, they looked at the contract with the city regarding the pilot payments, payment in lieu of taxes. And they felt that it wasn't interpreted accurately and that they had been overpaying what was appropriate. So they stopped paying us the pilot of about $500,000 a year for 7 years. I think they put it in an escrow somewhere, but they didn't pay it. And there was a discussion, past, present, and future. Past, what was the appropriate amount to be paid? But more importantly, focusing on how do we move forward. And there have been years of discussions, probably preceding many of us here. And every time we seem to get close, we come up with other issues. But Leisha determined that we're very close to having an agreement in place where the 7 years times $500,000 a year, the $3.5 million will be released from their escrow and paid to us in one lump sum when we sign an agreement. And then part of that agreement would be how much they would be required to pay us annually as a pilot payment going forward. The issue related to carting of trash at one of their facilities where they felt we weren't picking it up enough, or the way the service was offered to the city was not sufficient. They needed more frequent pickups during each week, and they were paying for it, but it wasn't offset. I don't even know all the details. Bottom line, the $3.5 million would get released as a lump sum. And then secondly, at the same time, we'd be entering into an agreement for a certain sum, or some certain might be the right legal phrase, of how much they are obligated to pay us and we are accepting. And we expect that to be resolved and that the payment would come in very early in the next fiscal year. So because of that, I was requested to add $3.5 million of additional revenue to my calculations. All that does, it doesn't change the amount allocated for spending for the Board of Ed or for the city. It just decreases the net tax levy we need to raise from the city in order to balance the budget. So if we're, in essence, generating $3.5 million less through taxes, that translates into a lower mill rate for each district and a lower average dollar amount of tax per district. And that's what we did. We ran through the numbers, and that's what's on page
29.
29.
29. I thought it was
28.
Oh, Henry, 28 has the detailed breakout in that far right column.
29 is, as you see, version number 25. This is what I call the below the line calculations. So very quickly, on the top, we have the expenditures, the 423,665, that hasn't changed. If you see the salmon colored box, departmental receipts, 10,578 went up by $3.5 million. That gets us 14,078. So therefore, the net tax levy goes down from 383.1 million to 379.6. We get averages for the city on page 28. And then on page 29, it's broken out by district. So it's absolutely just a reduction of the amount of taxes we're going to collect and a reduction of the mill rates and the average tax fund. I hope that answers. If you have any questions, you're going to ask Felicia, not me.
So,
Well-
questions from members of the board?
So we're
Yeah, I
going,
had
Oh,
a
hang on,
question.
hang on. Troy, you first.
real quick, John, so we're going by the version 25, and I'm looking at the districts, and it's 0.98 in the first district, and the sixth district is now 1.03. Is that correct?
Troy, that's
That's
the
correct.
difference That's the difference between version 24 and version 25. So if you look at that box with the blue headers, version 24, that's where we were as of the start of this meeting. The proposal with the additional 3.5 million is the second one. So in other words, for the first district, 25.33 becomes 25.08, so on and so forth. And then you've got the reduction in mill rates and then the percentage reduction at the very bottom. So it's roughly 1% for each district.
Mhm.
Wow. Great.
Jim, you had a question or a comment?
Yeah, I had two questions or comments. First one is the, in lieu of taxes in the revenue, section, it
Yeah.
shows that, it's 1.8 million a year, or we're running at 1.8 million a year surplus, or, over and above what the revenue we should have gotten. Yes.
Let me explain that, Jim. So payment in lieu of taxes is a situation where an entity is tax exempt and they make a arrangement with the other government to do a voluntary payment. So what you're
Right.
looking at in one section is the payment in lieu of taxes that the city of Norwalk receives from the state of Connecticut for colleges and universities, which are tax exempt and also state property. So that line item that you're looking at is a revenue that we receive from the state as a pilot because they don't have to pay property taxes.
Okay,
This-
so that's over and above it, but still, that's favorable right now at about $1.8 million. That's
Mhm.
the additional revenue that we expect to get. The other thing is that on the the building permits seem to be running about 2.6 million in addition to. Are we taking that into consideration at all in this? Or is it everything that the deal that Luis is working on right now?
Are you looking at year-to-date in fiscal 23?
Yeah,
I think, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. But the point is, if you recall the discussions you had with every department,
right.
I think the amount that was budgeted is based on historical and actual. So I think on the building permits, we had a peak year. It was absolutely out of the park. That's why we're millions of dollars favorable. We don't expect as much, but we did increase the budget from last year, if I recall.
Yes, we did.
So I think when we set the budget numbers, we take into account historical, let's say fiscal year 22 and previous, what the actuals were. We look at fiscal year 23 and we look at year to date, which was probably first half, December 31st. And we say, where are the numbers? And we try to keep everybody honest, just like we ask them to get these expenses as low as possible. We ask them for realistic revenue. I never want to forecast too high a revenue and get disappointed, but there was such an increase last year. We still think that there will be an increase for fiscal 24, but not as high as the actuals that came in this year. I hope that answers your question.
Well, I didn't think that we raised the revenue department receipts that much year over year, because it was only 10,335,000 last year, and we only had it at about 10,578,000, so it was marginally increased. But then when I looked at the numbers the other day that we received, and I noticed the huge increase in the revenue, in the receipts, I went back and I looked at the analysis and I saw the building permits being up 2.6 and the in lieu of taxes another 1.8 million. So I thought that's where that $3 million, 3 and change came from. So and now you're telling me it's not. So I'm just curious whether that other 2. And I'm not saying that we should adjust it at all, because I'm very, very happy. I'm tickled pink that the 6th taxing district gets a little bit more relief than we thought than I
Jim, if I could
expected.
clarify one other thing that I should have mentioned when I was explaining about the state pilot, they changed the formula last year after we entered the budget. We knew that they were going to be changing it, which is why Henry had anticipated in last year's budget an additional $4 million because that's what we were estimating it was going to be. It turned out to be more than that, which is why you see the 1.8 increase, but
Yeah.
that will now be a stagnant number because it's a formula grant. So we should be getting the same amount going forward every year, but we counted the right number this year. Does that make sense?
Okay, so in other words, and then I think in the Board of Ed, the revenue was a lot lower than what was expected this year. So that it kind of offsets it. So, but I guess my question is that I feel very comfortable because I think we got two real big numbers that were not anticipated in the budget from last year. That is, that 1.8 wasn't anticipated. It's higher than what we expected, even though the calculation may have changed. And the 2.6 in building permits is considerably higher than anybody expected, and that was not budgeted either. So bottom line is I feel very comfortable that where we're not having revenue coming in, such as in the Board of Ed, we're not going to run into some trouble. We're not going to run into a shortage of or not meeting our revenue expectations, because I think that this is a little bit of a cushion, if I will.
Exactly, and it may help us reduce the amount of rainy day drawdown that we end up taking as well.
I think if I remember Bill Ireland's testimony, this might have been pent up demand from COVID.
Yes.
You can't just project it going forward as a secular change. It was one time,
Yeah.
It dropped down. And we took that all into account in this year's budget, just like we did with the pilot. The first year we got the additional 4 million, it was a favorable variance because it wasn't budgeted. Subsequently, we've budgeted and we get more and more accurate each year, knowing what the actual numbers are.
Yep. Jim, any additional comments before we move to Ann?
No, that's fine.
Thank you, Ann.
I would just like to say that this is a huge win, and congratulations to the team that brought this in to save 94 basis points in increase. So having a 2% increase in taxes, I think is terrific. The other news relative to the way the bond agencies look at us, that's great news as well. And Mr. Mayor, I also still applaud the fact that you'll still continue to work on the BOE to bring that in, because that's a huge driver for the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Ann. Any additional questions or comments?
Question on
Yeah,
this
just-
about gains here. And maybe the mayor or Henry could explain. The POCO settlement, I know there was some money coming for legal fees. Is that going to be factored in for this next year? That should be coming in back to us? Is that, how would that? Just
Probably
maybe
not.
Summarize how that's going to work, Mayor.
Probably not. It's all got to be finalized. I mean, the deal's all signed, sealed. Now it has to be delivered, but I don't think it probably won't be factored into this year's budget.
Well, I'll go the other way. When you say this year, next year.
Yeah,
I mean, next year fiscal.
There's a good chance we'll get that cash. If we get it by end of August, it's included in our 23 fiscal results.
right.
It'd just be a bit of a surplus and a positive. I always prefer with revenue under budget and get positively surprised. Only usually related to litigation. When you're far off along and it's not litigated, but there's a settlement and there's a legal settlement, there's money coming in and it comes in at the right time in the budget process, we could build it in. Other than that, we tend to be very conservative on cash inflows.
And what you read is not a net amount. We did have some expenses based on legal fees and lawsuits, and so not a net amount.
Right. Okay. Any additional comments on the operating budget?
I just like the second what Ann just said is that I think this is just just great news, and hats off to Henry and Tom and Luis. And yeah, I think it's just great that, everybody's digging in and going, looking hard at the numbers and coming up with some very favorable stuff. The hard work has really paid off this year.
Thank you very much. I would just add and thank all of you on the BET. This is my 4th year. You guys were much more aggressive. You went down layers and layers. I thought you were going to find oil. You were going down so deep. And I've always been taught about operating controls and how to avoid fraud. And it starts with the tone at the top. So from a budgeting point of view, I just feel you guys reinforce what we've been trying to do. And we get rid of the fluff, but we try to give the resources to everybody who needs it. And it's a good teamwork. And I think we're seeing the good results. So thank you for your support.
Thank you, Henry. And I reiterate all the points made and the fact that, yes, this has been a true team effort by everyone involved, including the department heads, who were willing to be honest and relook at things as we needed. So they deserve credit as well.
The kudos to the new chairman. I'm sorry.
We can skip that part. All right, with all of that said, all in favor of approving the operating budget, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? After many months, the FY24 operating budget is approved. Congratulations all, and thank you for the effort.
I'll be
Alright.
sending out the 2026 pro forma tomorrow.
Thank
Just
you,
kidding, just
Tom.
kidding.
Appreciate that. Right? Always on top of things. All right. Next on our agenda is any additional information. I see we have Alan here to speak on Oak Hills briefly. So Alan, the floor is yours.
Good evening. I guess you call me small potatoes compared to all these, monopoly money numbers that I'm looking at. But the Oak Hills Park Authority is playing its part in keeping our expenses down and our revenue up and stuff. So just to briefly talk about financials, we're 9 months into our fiscal year here, 3 months to go. We look at the month of March, not the merry month of March, but the month of March. We were budgeted to lose $40,000. We did not lose $40,000. We actually lost $21,000, which is $19,000 better than our budget. How did we do that? Our revenue was actually a little bit behind compared to budget. Our restaurant income that we budgeted was not as high. No real surprises there. However, we were able to control our expenses. Our labor budget was under budget because we not had a general manager basically, and have been saving money in that area. So our labor was under. Our admin was under. We spent less money on the park maintenance and also on some expenses in the agricultural area in Jim Shaw's area. So we basically saved about $24,000 on our expenses. Bottom line, the month of March, we only lost 19. We were $19,000 better than budget in the month of March, which was a pretty good month for us overall. We now look to year to date, 9 months in the bank, and we are doing well. We are basically $178,000 ahead of our budget at this moment in time. How do we get there? Our revenue is $100,000 over. Basically, our revenue is $76,000 over on a net basis. More people are playing golf than we thought compared to budget. On a year-to-date basis, we've saved ourselves $102,000 in expenses. As I said, $63,000 that is payroll and benefits, but also we've been saving some money in the maintenance in the park area on in keeping our expenses down in that area. We did spend a lot of money on water, but our expenses are under our budget. So pretty good news as far as the finances are concerned, and that pretty much is my financial report.
Yeah,
Thank you, Alan.
Mr. Chairman. Yeah.
Yes, Mr.
Yeah, I was looking at the numbers here and I was quite impressed. It seems like things are moving in the right direction and we hope they keep moving in the right direction. Can you give us an update on the restaurant? What's happening there?
Yeah, we did, we're in the process, we actually, I think in your office, we have a revised type agreement with the restaurant, Mayor. And the old agreement was, and I reported this at the last committee BC meeting, was based on a percentage of revenue, which probably wasn't the best for us or the best for the operator. So we did negotiate a different lease agreement, basically, that would pay a certain amount on a monthly basis. And we started to do that, and he has made his first payment so far, I'm pleased to say. We also put into some verbiage in there about hours of operation, when it would be open, and type of things like that, and that he would not, the DDSA would not be able to close the restaurant without conferring with someone on the authority, because I think there's a lot of uncertainty last year with when the restaurant would be open, when it would be closed. So we have put verbiage like that into this agreement, and it's April's a tough month as far as opening and closing. Like this weekend, the weather was really, really bad, and so it wasn't open. So we've also kind of, I think DDSA has lowered their expectations. They started off as let's make it a high-end restaurant. Well, it really isn't a high-end restaurant. It's a restaurant that should be open for the golfers, where we can provide services to them and have it open and have it available to them. And we're going to be closely monitoring that. We're also looking at the possibility of, we didn't have a general manager last year, and we're looking to install a general manager's position there as we move forward, and are currently looking for candidates into that position.
Thank you.
Additional questions for Alan?
Alan, is the staff being reduced at all? You mentioned the savings was on labor and some wages. Are they running more streamlined now, or what?
Yeah, I'm not sure if it's streamlined. Are you talking about the restaurant, or are you talking about Oak Hills, Jim?
The operations, not.
I think obviously this is compared to budget. I think we did have some, in the last 9 months, we had some issues of getting staff, especially Jim Shell. So he ran pretty lean and mean in his area. When we write the budget next year, that may not be the same thing, because I think he would like to, it's a question of sometimes not being able to get people, especially in the grounds departments. But we did keep a pretty good eye on the starters. They were within budget, but the big number was the GM's position, because there's like $60,000 there. That was the big number. That will not appear next year if we have this new position.
Okay. Thanks.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Alan.
Okay.
We've got Lisa on the line. Lisa, do you want to talk briefly to the March narrative? And I'm sorry, we always put you last on the agenda, Lisa. Somehow I'll try and remember to put you first next month.
We were just talking about that offline. We might see a change next month.
Can you can hear me all right, I suppose?
Yeah. Yes.
Thank you. Yes, it is actually, of course, May 1st, but we have not yet proved out the month of April, so forgive me for that. But looking at the numbers for March, we were actually at 97.6% of our adjusted levy through the end of March, with 3 months still to go in the fiscal year, which was actually satisfactory to us. I did want to mention, it's not part of the narrative, but with the establishment of the tax rates for the operating budget for fiscal year end 2024, I'm going to be sending each one of you on the board a rate bill to sign, similar to what you signed for the change with the motor vehicle supplemental with the January billing, but this is for the initial billing for June of 2023. We require this. It's basically memorializing the action that you took tonight. So I will be sending, since you're not meeting in person, I'm going to send it individually to each of you and ask you to sign and date it and return it to me, and we'll keep all the copies in our permanent record. So look for that coming in the mail at some point I would say within the next week or so. And if you would be good enough to get it right back to us, that would be great. In other news with the narrative, and the spreadsheet. We are still running into some software issues, but we're working on it. We're looking ahead now really to the June billing. We're starting to talk with our printer and with the new vendor, the software vendor, about what those bills are going to look like and how we're going to be able to bring that revenue in. In other good news, we will be fully staffed in my division for the first time in about 15 months as of tomorrow. Our first new hire started today and one starts tomorrow. So things are looking up.
Congratulations.
glad
Maybe you'll get some sleep finally.
I'm glad to answer any questions that any of you might have.
Questions for Lisa?
Just Troy, real quick. When that document's ready, just can you send me an email? I'll come by and sign it real quick. You don't have to mail it.
Okay, that'd be great. Thank you. Will do.
I think Anne's signifying she will do the same.
Okay,
And you're right around the corner from me, Lisa, so I'm happy to do that as well.
okay. I'll send an email out to
No pressure,
everybody.
Jim.
Okay, I'll come and sign
Well, why
it.
don't we have a signing party?
There we go. All right. Lisa, again, thank you for all your work, and not only all of your work, but all of your patience for always being at the last part of these meetings. So thank
That's
you.
quite
very,
all
very
right.
much.
Thank you. Thank
All
you.
right.
Thank you. Last
It's
but not
because
least,
you
you
do
say,
so-
right?
It's because you do such a good job. We didn't have any questions for you.
That's right. It sends us off on a high note.
Ed, can I just have 30 seconds on admin
Absolutely, Tom.
items? So the next meeting is Monday, June 5th. The one after that, the first one in the new fiscal year, is currently scheduled for Monday, June 3rd. The
July
4th is the holiday. So I'm guessing that we will have perhaps a challenge to get a quorum that evening. I don't need an answer now, but you guys could take a look at your schedule, and if you're not going to be here on the 3rd, let me know. And if the 10th works for this group.
Okay. So
And
we
if,
all have that to do, and I'll reach out to Artie, who was not able to make it tonight, to make sure he gets an answer as well.
Okay.
And Artie will go down to City Hall.
Yeah, just tell him that there's no excuse. He has to go down there.
We haven't heard from Kendrick yet on whether or not he's coming to City Hall.
I think he's,
I'll come visit too.
Little peer pressure.
I'll also go to City Hall.
See, that hasn't happened in a while.
Oh,
Only kidding. Only kidding. All right. Any other business that anyone wants to raise before I move to adjourn?
I want to welcome Greg Burnett.
Hi, Greg.
Welcome. Hello.
So, Greg, you missed it, but we can now pay Mr. Mavendnik.
Very good. The work continues.
Yeah, and I did give him a heads up that we'll be probably looking for another 45,000 in the new fiscal year to finish up his effort.
That's correct. This is a major, as everyone's aware, this is a major effort with the charter revision, and the commission is doing some really great work. It's very time consuming, diligent, detailed work. And we're anticipating that the council will receive the initial report in the early June timeframe, so we can begin to do our work and then move towards hopefully having the charter revision on the ballot in November. So that is our goal.
Great. Thank you, Greg. Any other questions, comments?
I moved to
Then may I get a
adjourn.
motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Thank you, Jim. We are adjourned. Have a lovely evening, everybody. We'll talk again next month.
Thank you, everyone.
okay,
thank
bye-bye.
you. Bye.
All right, good night.